Hey now, everybody. Welcome to my top books of 2023, top books I read in the year 2023. I know everybody has been waiting more than a year for this list. It's much delayed. But I just figured I'd make this video for fun and to maybe give you guys some off-the-path recommendations maybe that you guys haven't heard of yet. So yeah, it's a very loose ranked list. The only real reason I'm doing it kind of ranked is because it's fun. So these were just really good books that I read in 2023. So yeah, so it's kind of a loose kind of list, and it's just fun to rank stuff. We love to rank things on the internet. We love that. I don't know what that's about, but people love ranking things. But yeah, I got my stack of books here. And I'm going to start from, I got 11 here. I don't know why I got 11, but you know what? The more the merrier. So yeah, we're going to start here with my number 11 pick. Number 11 best book I read. By the way, I should mention, I read 32 books in 2023, so this is kind of out of a pool of 32 books. Some of them were plays. Some of them were obviously novels, history books, kind of spanning the whole range. But anyway, we're going to start with number 11 is The Panther and the Honey Badger, a correspondence by Mark Kozelek and Kevin Corrigan. This book is, so Kevin Corrigan's an actor. He's a great character actor. He was in Goodfellas. He was in a bunch of other stuff. He's in a ton of movies. And then Mark Kozelek's a musician, kind of a singer-songwriter musician. And this book is one of 2 volumes, and it's literally them emailing each other every day for a year. So the book is just their emails. And part 1 is the first half of the year. Part 2 I haven't read yet. I'm going to read it this upcoming year. But part 2 is just a continuation. And this was a really cool book. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Mark Kozelek, so I think that's kind of mostly why I enjoyed it. So it might not hit for other people as much as it did for me. But I don't know. It was interesting because Mark's a musician, Kevin Corrigan's an actor, and a lot of the book is just them talking about being artists. And you'll see on this list, that's kind of a theme with some of the other books I loved, is kind of the life of an artist, the challenges, the expectations you have of being a creative person, kind of how irregular the work can be, how difficult it can be to travel, especially, with Mark on the road all over the world, being a musician, doing all these shows, and Kevin talking about, it can be hard waiting for work. It can be hard trying to figure out, what roles to do. He talks about he has a studio, and he in the book he lives in Tribeca, New York City, and he's moving to Queens. And he talks about that. He talks about his parents. How he has a studio in Queens, and he's spending a lot of time in the studio and thinking about life and all that. So I don't know. It's a light read. Yeah, if you're looking for something kind of light and informative, and you're a fan of either of these 2 guys, definitely pick it up. It's The Panther and the Honey Badger, a correspondence, is number 11. All right. Number 10 is a memoir, history type of thing. All right, number 10 is a great, I love this book, The Way of the Strangers, Encounters with the Islamic State by Graham Wood. This was really weird and good and just, I don't know, it ominous and great writing, great insight. So this is a book. This is a rare case where a journalist writes a book that's just, it's not just a Washington Post article. A lot of times when I read books by journalists, it just is so boring. It's so safe. And and it's very like this happened, then this happened, then that happened. There's no flavor, there's no personality in a lot of the books that I have personally read from journalists. But this is a huge exception. Graham Wood is a great writer. There's a lot of personality in this book, and more than anything, it's really interesting, in-depth, firsthand reporting. I mean, this guy, he goes deep into these extremist organizations in Egypt, and he talks to a bunch of members of ISIS who are most of them are from the West. So some of you guys might know or remember that with ISIS, there was a lot of people from the Western world going to join ISIS, and that was kind of a mystery or a problem that people were kind of stumped as to why they would do that. So Graham Wood kind of explores what ISIS believed. It's not a military history or a military book. It's all about the ethos and the belief systems and the culture of ISIS and other terrorist organizations. So it's really insightful for anyone interested in extremism or the wars in the Middle East. It's a great kind of like companion piece to a lot of the other books I've read about the Iraq War and what's going on in the Middle East. So yeah, really good. It's a page turner. It especially when he talks about, there's a period in the book where he talks about being in Egypt and meeting people who are just living with extremists and going through. There's a lot of parts in the book where people are passing through these cities to go into Syria and to join ISIS, and how they cross the border and how they even get into Syria and Iraq, northern Iraq, was super interesting. And like a lot of it has to do with the internet and how ISIS and these extremist organizations utilize Twitter and the internet to get people to come to Syria and northern Iraq and to tell them how to get there and what to expect. And so, yeah, this was great, super informative. It's not too long. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and it's just really great. So that was number 10. Number 9 is a book about one of my favorite all-time topics, my favorite historical realm, which is the Italian Renaissance and the Renaissance in general. Number 9 is the Montefeltro Conspiracy, a Renaissance mystery decoded by Marcello Simonetta. I tried to pronounce all that correct. I know it shouldn't be hard to pronounce, but I'm under pressure here. This is a lot, okay? This is my debut on the channel. I'm showing my face. You're in my apartment right now, okay? This is a lot. I usually don't let people in here. But anyway, so the Montefeltro Conspiracy. This is a very kind of short and to the point, I don't want to say micro history, but it's a very specific history book examining the assassination attempt on Lorenzo de' Medici. So Lorenzo de' Medici, there was an assassination attempt in, I forget what year, 1470s. I don't remember any. I don't retain any of this information. But anyway, there was an assassination attempt to kill Lorenzo de' Medici, who was the de facto ruler of Florence. His brother died, but Lorenzo survived. And it's one of these crazy assassination attempts that took place in a church during Mass. And if you played Assassin's Creed 2, you will remember that beautiful mission where Lorenzo survives, etc. So I love this book. It kind of explores who was behind the assassination attempt. So it talks about how the Pope, I'm gonna try to remember, Pope Sixtus the Sixth or something like that. How he was pulling the strings partially to try to get rid of Lorenzo de' Medici. So the Pope was involved. The Duke of Urbino at the time, who's on the cover here, he was involved, and it kind of goes into a biography of him. He's a really cool character. So I really loved learning about him and the Duchy of Urbino, which is a lesser known city in the Renaissance, but just as potent for its size as Florence was. I also want to say that the book has some really cool illustrations I love these kind of illustrations, these old maps that they include here. So yeah, this was just a really fun, engaging book about that time period and about that specific moment in history. All right, we're going to change gears here to some fiction. Kind of, it's weird. It's a film script, and that is My Dinner with Andre by Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory. And it's the screenplay to the film. And so, My Dinner with Andre, if you don't know, is like an experimental film that has I don't want to say a cult following, but it's highly, highly respected in the avant-garde kind of experimental film world. It's basically a movie about two guys talking about life, and that's it. It's basically like the first podcast. Interestingly enough, so I saw the movie and I respected it, but it didn't click for me, and so I decided to read the screenplay because I'm not good at audiobooks, and I felt like I needed to read the conversation to really get the most out of it, as opposed to watching the movie, and it really helped out. I guess I'm more of a visual learner, or I learn better by reading versus listening. So yeah, this is a classic. It's kind of an exploration of modern society from the point of view of these two characters. Wallace Shawn plays a broke, nebbish artist who he's kind of been crushed by modern society, and he mentions that instead of thinking about art all the time, now he thinks about his rent and taxes and how he's going to pay for food, and he's kind of demoralized. I think he's a playwright in the movie, in the story. So yeah, he's a playwright. And then he's catching up with an old friend who's played by Andre Gregory, who's very wealthy, and he's like traveled the world and been a part of these experimental plays in the forest, and he's talking about all these books and music, and he's kind of talking about trying to get in tune with life, trying to find meaning, I guess, in weird experimental ways, and it's kind of like them talking about that. So I don't know, it's kind of this dichotomy where, I don't know, the struggle of trying to find that in our modern society. And they talk about how people are kind of sleepwalking, how people are, I don't know, just kind of, I don't want to say zombies sounds too harsh, but kind of droning on through the society we have, watching a bunch of television, not thinking, not challenging things, and kind of that whole thing. The ending is what sticks out to me, and I should probably do quotes as a part of this, but I don't necessarily want to spoil this. I would just watch the movie if you're interested. It's a classic. Yeah, I don't know. Andre Gregory at the end, he kind of gives this monologue about like what our concepts of things are, like the concepts that we kind of just take at face value. Like he talks about like what is a father, what is a son, what does that really mean? He just talks about how, I'll just read the quote. It's a great quote. I still don't know necessarily what it means, but to have a real relationship with a person that goes on for years, well, that's completely unpredictable. Then you've cut off all your ties to the land and you're sailing into the unknown, into uncharted seas. And I mean, people hang on to these images of father, mother, husband, wife, again, for the same reason, because they seem to provide some firm ground. But there's no wife there. What does that mean, a wife, a husband, a son? A baby holds your hands, and then suddenly there's this huge man lifting you off the ground, and then he's gone. Where's that son, And I don't know, that's stuck with me. I really like that quote. Kind of the giving in to dedicating your life and yourself to another person that you fall in love with, instead of trying to, have it all and kind of that. That's a very all right. So yeah, that's My Dinner with Andre. Continuing on, we have some humor by the greatest comic mind, for my money, who's ever lived, and that's Woody Allen. And this is a collection of three of his books. But the one I want to highlight is Side Effects. Side Effects by Woody Allen. It's a very short collection of humor essays, short stories, and it's the high mark of what humor and short stories can be, in my opinion. They're funny as hell. They're smart, but not too pretentious. They're not trying to come across as witty. They're just funny. And Woody Allen's an incredible filmmaker. He's an incredible writer, a great stand-up comic. I mean, he's just a genius. And Side Effects, I think was the first. It was the first Woody Allen that I read in prose form, and I highly recommend it. It's very short, very easy to read. It can get a little. He uses a lot of references. He uses a lot of cultural references that might seem pretentious or intimidating, but they're really not. He actually talks about in his autobiography that he has this weird ability to kind of reference all these different kind of cultural things to enlighten or kind of like impress his audiences, whereas he doesn't really is not as maybe well versed as he comes across. But I thought that was a super interesting point that he brought up in his autobiography. But you'll see that a little bit in his writings. He'll mention, like, I don't know, famous composers or playwrights or whatever. So it can come across a little bit stuffy or not stuffy, but a little bit pretentious, I guess. But it's really not. It's just pure funny. Funny is funny. And so, yeah, I highly recommend Side Effects by Woody Allen. All right, as I go through this list, I'm realizing how much variety I have in here. So we've had history, we've had emails, we've had a screenplay, humor essays, we've had terrorism, and this next book is no different in terms of the diversity we have here. And this book is Outlive by Peter Attia. This is the end-all, in my opinion, the end-all, be-all, the only book you really need in terms of health and longevity science, and kind of like the new wave that we're seeing in the West, where people are really starting to think about longevity and prevention instead of prevention of things like dementia or heart disease, getting ahead of these things, living a very healthy lifestyle instead of waiting for these things to happen. And that's a big thing that he talks about in Outlive is Medicine 3.0. He goes into and I think this will be like a landmark like thing in the future as we look back. I think his theories on Medicine 2.0 versus Medicine 3.0 is really going to be viewed as the start of something great in the future. I think it will really take off, and it will be really in the zeitgeist or whatever. So anyway, Outlive. It's basically a book on how to live a healthy life, the different categories of things you have to think about: exercise, diet, mental health. He has the whole last part of the book is about emotional health, which is often left out of a lot of these longevity health books. So that's also a standout. It's him talking about his personal health journey, his personal journey with mental health, and how that was something he wasn't thinking about until lately. And so, yeah, it's in my opinion, if I had to give someone one book on health and everything you need to know on how to live healthily, how to prevent all these common diseases that we have in the West, it would be Outlive by Peter Attia. Really, really amazing book, and one that I will be revisiting over the years. All right, so number 5, we're getting kind of up there now. These are the heavy hitters, and number 5 is I would say the best book that I've read on the Middle East. It's the best book I've read about the Iraq War, which is one of my interests, and that is The Forever War by Dexter Filkins. This is I cannot recommend this book enough. It's not that long. It's very much a page turner, as much as you can kind of get for a book like this. And Dexter Filkins is an incredible writer. He's the antithesis again of what I was saying about the trouble you can come across with some of the journalists writing books, that boring kind of just very sanitary, straight edge writing that you can get in a lot of these books written by journalists. Not the case with The Forever War. The Forever War is a memoir, not necessarily a linear memoir, but just kind of a collage of Dexter Filkins, his experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan during the Iraq War and during the Afghani War, and before that as well. He talks about what Afghanistan was like before the war started there. And it is just gripping. There's a ton of action, not that it's glorious or anything, but it's crazy. It just portrays, it perfectly encapsulates how purely chaotic the Iraq War was. That's the number one takeaway I have from this book, is that nobody knew what the hell was going on during the Iraq War. There was just chaos. They would have one strategy that wouldn't work, so they would completely do a 180 and go all completely the other way and try that strategy. You have billions of dollars being funneled into the war, and he's obviously on the ground, so he's like embedded with the military. He talks about, I think it was Ramadi, the invasion or the battle of Ramadi. I think that's what it was. Yeah, it's pretty rock and roll, this book. I'll give you an example. Some of the chapter names kind of say it all here. I love how he has a Moby Dick quote to start the book. But some of the chapter names. Chapter 10, Kill Yourself. Okay. 16, The Revolution Devours Its Own. Chapter 18, Fuck Us. So, yeah, it's anything but sanitary. This is an excellent portrait of what it was like on the ground during the Iraq War and the Afghani War. Amazing book. Highly, highly, highly recommend. And I wish I had more to say on the specifics. It's hard. One of the things I want to do going forward on the reading project I'm going to do next year is I'm going to do every book I read, I'm going to try to do like a little 10-minute summary video and just kind of give like the main points of what I got out of the book. I think that's going to help me kind of remember more and get more out of these books. But that's for a future video. All right, number 4 is a play. And it is a play by Wallace Shawn, who obviously was in My Dinner with Andre, as I mentioned before. And this is one of the best things I've ever read, and something I will revisit for years to come. And that is Marie and Bruce by Wallace Shawn. Marie and Bruce is a very bizarre play about a married couple who are not doing well in their relationship. And it is fucking weird. Wallace Shawn, you may know him as the T-Rex toy in Toy Story, or the guy from Princess Bride. But yeah, he was in Manhattan by Woody Allen. He's been in a couple Woody Allen films. Rifkin's Festival. Shout out to Rifkin's Festival. It doesn't get enough love. But yeah, Wallace Shawn, he's also always been a playwright, and his plays are fucking bizarre and perverted as fuck. They're all having to do with sexuality and weird sexual urges. The collapse of society. There's a play he wrote called The Fever, which is really good. That's probably the most normal of his plays that I've read, kind of more grounded in reality. But stuff like Our Late Night or The Designated Mourner are freaking bizarre, and I highly recommend all his work, at least the stuff that I've read. He's super interesting. But Marie and Bruce really spoke to me because it's a portrait of a rotten, toxic relationship, where the woman hates the guy that she's married to. She resents him. She looks down on him. She fucking hates him. And he's kind of oblivious, and his mind is elsewhere. He's thinking about, I think there's, if I remember correctly, there's one scene where he wants to fuck a 16-year-old that he sees out at a pizza parlor or something like that. That's where his mind is at. And then, I don't know if I remember these things correctly or if I'm just making this up, but there's a scene where she fantasizes about having sex with a dog, and what does that mean? It comes across very Freudian, very kind of exploring basic human sexual drives, power dynamics, our relationships with other people, and how they're intertwined with violence and these inexplicable thoughts and drives that we may have. But the reason I loved it so much is that I really related to the story, and to, unfortunately for me, I related to kind of that experience of being in a kind of toxic relationship where the two people resent each other, but you can't necessarily escape for whatever reason. You can't get out of it, but you want to get out of it, but you really don't want to get out of it. And it's just, I mean, that's the definition of toxic, is something where it's fundamentally dysfunctional, but for whatever reason, it won't end. And so Marie and Bruce is an excellent exploration of that, and of marriage in general, because if you read it, you'll kind of see, is he taking a critical look at a toxic relationship, or is he taking a critical look at marriage as an institution and monogamy as an idea? You know, it's like, is he focusing in on a specifically bad relationship, or is this a commentary on marriage and relationships, and not necessarily trashing relationships? Obviously, we need them as a species, but kind of exploring maybe hating each other is just a part of being in a relationship. Maybe that's just a part that you have to deal with. And that's where it really is interesting to me, is kind of, what is he trying to say? What is he exploring with that? So, yeah, Wallace Shawn's Marie and Bruce, highly recommend. One of the best things I've read in recent memory. All right, number 3 is I don't have a copy of this one. I lent it out, which is always a mistake. I never learn. I lent it out, and it came back destroyed. It had PTSD. It was all ripped up. So I don't have the copy with me. But number 3 is 9 Stories by J.D. Salinger. The Catcher in the Rye historically has always been my favorite book ever since I read it when I was 16. It's a book that I've reread the most. Usually I read it every other year. I probably will take this year off, but yeah, and I always read it around Christmas. It's like a whole thing. But 9 Stories by J.D. Salinger has just about as much magic in it for me as The Catcher in the Rye. I read 2023. I read all Salinger's works, Franny and Zooey. I think it's pronounced Zooey. Phil Seymour, an Introduction, and Raise High the Roof Beam Carpenter. But 9 Stories stood out to me. 9 Stories is just amazing. It's again, it's short. I would read it, but I don't know. There's just a magic to it. A lot of the stories take place in New York City, so that's already a plus. And yeah, it's just kind of it's kind of in line with him as an author. Kind of, it's a lot of coming of age, a lot of nostalgia, dealing with the past, trying to make sense of the past, get past the period where innocence dies, and kind of that transition of kind of realizing what the world is, and kind of these kind of the death of innocence, but basically the funeral, putting innocence to rest as you grow older, and life kind of shows its cards, and you're trying to deal with, not everything works out, not everything is has a happy ending, not all relationships last. So yeah, Nine Stories. Nine Stories is great. It's a classic. I highly, highly recommend Nine Stories, especially if you loved The Catcher in the Rye. His other works didn't hit for me really nearly as much as Nine Stories and The Catcher in the Rye. I don't know. People love Franny and Zooey. That's like a lot. There's a huge fan base for Franny and Zooey. It didn't hit for me, but Nine Stories I can recommend to anybody. Loved it. All right, and number 2, we have just an utter classic. One of the best books I've read ever, and that is Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer. Henry Miller is an interesting character for me. I'm a pretty pessimistic guy. A lot of the media I consume, I've noticed, has a pessimistic, nihilistic tint to it, and it leans disturbing and all that. That's something I'm trying to challenge going forward, is kind of the edgelord tendencies that I have. And Henry Miller is such a great, not antidote to that, but it's such a great way to balance negativity. He's a very positive, open writer and character. And Tropic of Cancer is about his time in Paris in the 1920s, when he was a struggling writer, trying to get off his feet, trying to get things started. And basically, the book is the life of an artist. I mean, that to me, it's almost, I don't want to say it's like the Bible for artists, but it encapsulates the spirit of creativity and trying to hack it out as an artist in our society. Again, it's kind of tied to My Dinner with Andre. It's kind of this insight into what it is to be kind of a creative person in a world where that is not rewarded, at least when you're first starting out. He especially, the thing that you got to remember with Henry Miller is that he's ranting against, societal expectations and being a corporate drone, and that's kind of like basic now, but this guy was writing that in the 1920s. I mean, this was before World War II, before the post-war kind of postmodern disillusionment with all that stuff kind of started. He was way ahead of the game. And I don't know, the book is funny, man. It is a funny, bizarre, rambling, philosophical, psychological, memoir, collage, watercolor painting of a book. There's no real story. And I think, I remember the first half of the book, I did not get it. I was not on board. And this happens. I'm reading more Henry Miller now, and it happened again. I'm reading this book called Big Sur and the Oranges of Hieronymus Bosch. And the same thing kind of happened there. The first half, I was not into it. I wasn't plugged in. And then he won me over again, and you kind of got to get on board with his frequency and kind of meet him where he's at, and kind of just go with it. Let him take you on his rambling psychological tangents and his philosophical tangents, and kind of just don't expect a story, don't expect a narrative, don't expect it to necessarily make sense. But yeah, Tropic of Cancer is fucking hilarious. It's insightful. It's exciting. It just has so much life. I mean, I underlined a couple things. Maybe I'll read a couple quotes here. This is him. I believe, if I'm going back here, he's thinking about his ex-wife who is in America. He basically had a sudden breakup with his wife, and he's thinking about her. He's like, I can hardly remember what she looks like, nor even how it feels to have my arms around her. Everything that belongs to the past seems to have fallen into the sea. This was a classic. He's talking about a guy who died suddenly, and this is the eulogy he provides this guy he knew who died at a company he worked at. He was a zero, and even the fact that he was dead wouldn't add a cipher to his name. Pretty blunt on that. Not all of it's positive. let's see what this is. This seems funny, dude. This is funny too. He's talking about sex and learning about. That's the other thing about Miller that's weird. Is like people when they think about the Tropic of Cancer, especially Tropic of Capricorn. A lot of people think like it's super super sexual because his books were banned in the United States because he does talk about sex pretty vividly. But when you read it now, again, it's not necessarily super heavy on the sexual side. He does talk about it at length, but things have changed, and wet ass pussy is on the radio. So whatever. That's not what the book is about for me. So I don't know. I think that it kind of has a bad rap in that sense where people just think, oh, it's all about sex. It's really not. But he does talk about it in this sentence. It's hilarious to me, and I underlined it. He's talking about all that mystery about sex, and then you discover that it's nothing, just a blank. Wouldn't it be funny if you found a harmonica inside or a calendar? But there's nothing there, nothing at all. It's disgusting. It almost drove me mad. Listen, do you know what I did afterwards? I gave her a quick lay, and then I turned my back on her. Yeah, I picked up a book and I read. But yeah, Henry Miller, Tropic of Cancer. It's a must-read for anyone interested in the arts, I think, or anyone who's a creative person. Anyone who's set out on that journey. I think Tropic of Cancer is like, I don't know, it embodies the spirit of trying to do that. And one big takeaway too is that how poor he was. I mean, half the book he's talking about just thinking about his next meal and kind of the relationships he has in Paris, where a lot of them are just very transactional. He's basically using people to like get him meals, and he's just living on scraping by to the highest degree. So yeah, that's Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller. Highly recommend. All right, so we have reached our number one book of 2023, and it is the book that got me back into reading as an adult. This book got me back into reading, and for that, I will always be thankful. It's a book that you 99.99% you have not heard of. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever read. It's a challenging work, and it's a book that I have 2 copies of. That's how much I love it. And it is Ancient Evenings by Norman Mailer. Ancient Evenings by Norman Mailer is, I'm going to struggle to try to explain it, but it's a historical, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a historical, it's set in ancient Egypt. It spans a wide, it's like has multiple timelines. A big part of the book and the most normal, just traditional part of the book has to do with the Battle of Kadesh, which was this massive battle between Ramses II in Egypt and the Hittites on the Sinai Peninsula. And basically, it was the first treaty written that we have. Massive battle. It was ended in a stalemate, even though Ramses II claimed victory. But that's kind of in the centerpiece of the book, but it kind of switches timelines. It will go to the reign of Ramses IX, which is like the most random pharaoh. He's kind of like mid. He's not famous at all. He's just kind of like this middling pharaoh who's kind of like on. It's on the decline of the ancient Egypt as a world power, and he's kind of like, what is my legacy? And he wants to know about Ramses II. So like a lot of the characters, it has a lot to do with like telepathy, magic, a ton of mythology. He goes into the whole mythology of the Egyptian gods in the first part of the book. And I want to stress this. The amount of sex and really graphic, weird sexual descriptions and actions in the book, it is disgusting. This book is a blight on morality. And so now that I'm thinking about it, that's a theme in my top books of 2023. I'm kind of concerned. But Ancient Evenings, it's nearly impossible to describe, but I think it's great, and I would recommend it. I mean, read the first 100 pages or something, and then bail if you hate it. But it's just I've read nothing like it. I haven't come across anything like it. Mailer thought of it as one of his best works, as far as I know, and I do think that there might be some sort of revival where it will be like better examined or like whatever, because it's kind of been forgotten and it got snubbed kind of when it released. Um, but yeah, I think he was trying to explore like the birth of morality in humanity. And one of the things he talks about is he had to remind himself as he was writing this book that took place in ancient Egypt, kind of like during the Bronze Age collapse. He had to keep reminding himself that it was before Judeo-Christian morality, which I think says a lot about the book. I think what he was trying to tap into was human nature before Judeo-Christian values kind of put restrictions on who we are as humans. And so he kind of uses ancient Egypt as this playground to explore the human soul with no restraints on it. And so you get a lot of sexual excess. And a lot of the book is about the wealthy and how excess the wealth was in the society. And he also mentioned that he wanted to showcase how, like, an ancient evening, and a lot of the book takes place at a dinner party. And it's weird. I don't know how to explain this book. A lot of it takes place at a dinner party, and he wanted to kind of show, like, it wasn't all that different in his imagination or in his vision than an evening of Manhattanites at a fancy restaurant. And kind of like how, he wanted to tap into how the wealthy just live differently than the rest of us, and what that kind of pure excess is like, and what that unleashes in humans. In my mind, the book has a lot to do with, kind of the birth of morality. I think I don't want to spoil it. I want everyone who has any interest to just read this book. And then the other thing I'll say is that it has a lot to do with ambition. You have this interplay between Ramses IX wanting to learn more about Ramses II, who's like a really famous, one of the greatest pharaohs in our history, the way that we look back on it now. And he's trying to understand, like, how his legacy could be anything like Ramses II. So it has a lot to do with ambition. It has a lot to do with sexual impulse and human impulse and the birth of morality, what it was, basically a pre-ethical humanity. None of that made sense, but that's kind of the way I interpreted the book. But yeah, it's a challenging read. It's bizarre. It's really boring at some parts, insanely fascinating at other parts. It's kind of all over the place, but it was the best book I read in 2023, and it's the book that got me back into reading. It kind of was like, all right, there's some stuff out there. I don't know why it just got me back into it, but it kind of sparked my motivation and passion for reading again. And I think that it just was so out of left field for me that I was like, what else is out there that's this, like, impactful for me? And I've never stopped thinking about the book after I've read it. There's a lot of times I'll just kind of mull over, like, what was Norman Mailer trying to say with Ancient Evenings? So yeah, I hope I did a good job at kind of explaining that. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to touch on, but yeah, that's my top 11 books of 2023. I think I'll do one on 2024 when the year ends. I did not read as much in 2024, but I had enough great good books that I definitely could make a video. And yeah, so that's kind of my top books. I hope that was useful to somebody. I hope somebody kind of explores some of these titles if it sounded interesting. So stay tuned if you want, and I'll see you guys in a future video. Peace and love. All right, bye.